Welcome to a special edition of Crawford County Outdoors. We've done many times in the past lots of things about hunting, but what we've never really done is how do we get from the actual harvesting of the animal and get it to Chef Lisa. So today we're going to show the processing process of a deer. Now, if this is going to be offensive to you to see the raw meat and the deer, yeah, I would suggest turning it off. But I think a lot of folks have asked about this over the years. In the past, we focused on the practicing your shooting and building your tree stand, and we've had biology professors on talking about the deer and their behavior and so on. We're going to take this through now. How do you get it to Chef Lisa? So she's going to be cooking something for us later. But the first step here is, after you've removed the entrails, is to get that skin off. So I have in my shed a little pulley system in the roof where I can hoist the deer up, and I hoist it up by the back legs with the head hanging down so that I can start to get the skin pulled off. So the first step is to cut around the back leg just on the thigh side of the knee, and you have to be careful because there's a tendon there, and you use that tendon to hoist. Now, I have two ropes, as you can see in the picture there, one holding each leg, and you have to be careful not to break that tendon because that's actually giving you the tension that's holding it up there. And so you want your deer to age for a while, but you also want it to be able to hang by that strong part. So just making a small incision going all the way around the back leg, but you're pulling the skin away so that you're not cutting into the tissue inside. You're just getting the skin. And you can feel with your fingers. You can feel where the skin is. And as you pull on it, it will pull away from what's inside. So again, you have to go all the way around, being real cautious. You want to be as careful as you can, also to try and keep the hair out of the meat because that just makes extra work later on. But you got to get all the way around. And then once you can see here from the video, as you can see, when you start to just put a little pressure on, it peels relatively easily. Oh, by the way, too, I always make it a point to get a pair of rubber or vinyl gloves on. That actually helps your grip. It's kind of a little slippery. You know, there's going to be some blood and there's going to be some fat and some things like that. And with the gloves on, that actually helps your grip, so you can do this more easily. Okay, so now I made a little split down the inside of the thigh there, and you're using the blade. By the way, another point too, Andy Alm was our guest blacksmith on the show here a while back, and he made the little knife that I'm using. So it's a drop point knife, so it's kind of rounded. The blade's kind of rounded, and it's not a real kind of sharp point, as you can see there from that. That actually kind of helps on this part of the process here, because you need that rounded part. You're kind of partly pulling the skin. You're not cutting the skin off, you're kind of pulling it, but it hangs on to the connective tissue on the inside. So just that rounded point, you're not stabbing into the meat, you're just separating the skin from the meat. And there's a little bit of a layer. We'll talk about that some more too. And now, of course, you got two legs to work on. But let's get the one side started here real well first, and we'll start on the other side. Where I open the body cavity there to remove the entrails, it's sometimes a little bit tricky to get that skin pulled away from that. But as you can see here, just a little bit at a time, peeling that fat away, and you put pressure on and just kind of nip at it with the drop point knife. You don't have to have a 8-inch long blade. You really only need 3 or 4-inch long blade, and I really like that. I really like that rounded. Because as you can see real clearly there, the peeling, and you're just kind of separating here. Now on the back of the deer, the tail. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, now we got a second leg, and the same thing as the first leg. Grab a hold of the skin and pull it a little bit, and I could actually use that little opening that I cut behind the front bone on the upper leg there, and that tendon. You can kind of pull in there to get a hold of the skin. And then once you have it started, just pull the skin and cut real gently, making sure not to cut into the meat or to cut into that tendon. But just put some pressure on and pull, and it does come down. Does come down pretty well. Someone might say, well, why don't you just take the deer to the processor? And that's great. That's a fine thing to do. There's a number of them around Crawford County that do an excellent job. I've used them myself. My point about that is, do you want to know how to do this yourself? And maybe you have a particular way that you like the meat done in a particular way. Take it to the processor, and you can describe to him, okay, I want roasts, I want some steaks, I want this and that. I had a friend teach me some years ago, probably, 20 or 25 years ago, his process for this, and it's like, I like the whole process. Yes, the making the tree stand, and yes, finding like the right area where the deer are going to be in the fall, and all those, and then all the way through, processing the meat, and then making it into the kinds of cuts of meat that my wife has some great recipes for, and Chef Lisa has some great recipes for. So I like the process all the way through. So I choose to do it myself, and that's, I guess, the point of our show today is if you want to try this yourself, you probably can come up with a way that's best suits your needs. But if you talk to 10 people who do their own deer, you'll probably get 10 different techniques. So I don't have any super magical techniques about this, but I do it the way that I learned many years ago, and probably end up doing a couple deer a year, and you go to the processor and they do hundreds of deer a year. So here we are pulling the skin, and again, just kind of shaving in between the meat and the skin. And as you put pressure, it kind of comes down when you're around that body cavity. It's a little bit tricky. The tail has a little segment of bone, and right there, I'm just kind of separating in between the bone, and the tail comes right off with the skin. The skin peels pretty easily. Then, through that whole rib cage area, you can kind of pull, and you can see how it's kind of like turning it inside out here. And again, when you get some extra connective tissue, you just kind of trim a little bit. You want to get that skin off relatively early. You want the deer to cool. Now, this particular deer we took in early archery season, and it was pretty warm out. I've talked to friends, and they say, "Oh yeah, let the deer hang with the skin off for at least a week." Now, in early archery season, the temperature was still pretty warm; it hadn't started to cool yet, so that didn't work for this one. I'm afraid the meat would have been damaged by the heat, so we got it cut up and put into the refrigerator. But we'll get to that later. But the key thing, the first step is once you get to a place where you can get it hanging and get yourself some workspace, is to get that skin off. Not terribly hard, but it does take a little bit of work. I think you can see in this area, the entry wound. One thing I used I'm not endorsing anything, but I use the Rage broadhead, which has an expansion blade that pops out when it hits the deer, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on the video with my crossbow of the deer being shot, but just at the last second, as I was pulling the trigger, the deer turned around. I don't know if a bug was biting it or something, but it turned around and it changed the angle. So where the arrow hit on the chest, it was kind of facing like 90 degrees to me, and then as it twisted around, the angle changed, and so the arrow entered and missed its lungs and went through its liver. So I had to wait and not get it that evening, and I could hear it moving around, but I could tell that it was injured. So I went back and got it first thing in the morning. So we started filming the processing first thing in the morning. But you can see, I think there are just from one little arrow, about a 2.5 or 3 inch wound that expandable broadhead. So that's technology-wise, those things are really something. I have gotten a few deer now with the crossbow in recent years, and that expandable broadhead, boy, that's a really working thing. As I'm getting down near the front legs, got to split that skin in half and then go around the front leg, kind of like we did around the back leg. In a way, it's a little bit trickier going around the front leg, but because you're kind of like peeling it down, and then you have to kind of split it in half as you're going. Interesting, we'll see later how much more challenging it is to get the back legs unhooked from the deer as it is to get the front legs off. They're actually relatively easy to get off. It's a little bit trickier getting the skin off around that front leg. Just keep nipping away and keep pressure on, and it does peel. I've talked to friends in the past before that in rifle season, we shoot the deer in the head because you don't want to mess up any of the meat. And I want to make sure I get the deer on the ground. So going for those vital organs is a key thing. You can really see the drop point knife in this part of the shot there with that rounded. So not stabbing into the meat, not stabbing yourself, but that rounded blade is perfect for this part of the process. Just kind of slicing through the skin while you have pressure on it and then peeling it away. So what I do also when I'm working on it this way is I keep just a cardboard box with a garbage bag inside for little scraps of fat or connective tissue or other things that I'm not going to need. The part where the hooves are, we'll cut those off later and toss that in the box. And okay to put that just in your regular trash. Now I tie the bag up real tight and sometimes double bag so that it doesn't really, as it starts to decay, you can kind of get some pretty nasty odors from that. But I'll tie it up real well, and generally it's only going to be in the trash can for the next week. Like I said, the front legs are a little bit trickier to get the skin off because you're turning it inside out and you're working around the shoulder and around the leg. But just keep going, keep putting pressure on, and keep nipping away with your drop point knife there. I think you can see in the back of the shed there a come along that hangs on the side wall there to the right. I use that to hoist the deer up in the first, first get it up there, then tie one leg and then tie the other leg up. So that gives me a good stable, so I can, because you have to put some pressure on to pull that skin down. Now this deer only weighed about 100 pounds, and it wasn't terribly heavy, but still I used the come along to lift it up there. So I didn't. I was working on that part by myself. If you have 2 or 3 people to help you, then you probably don't need that. But have a friend, and they have a whole bunch of those in their garage ceiling that they use every year for hoisting up, because it was kind of like the central family member's garage near in the hunting area, and they're, whoever gets one, let's run it down to the garage building. And so they're often on their own. So when you are there on your own to hoist that deer up, it is handy to have that thing available. So I put one pulley in the ceiling, and I use the come along, and it's kind of a click, click, click process to hoist it up, and that works real well. So when you get down here on the front leg, down just above the elbow, then you can kind of stop peeling the skin off, because then you can cut, because you're going to get rid of that front part of the leg. There's no usable meat in that part anyhow. You want to get that skin down as close to, once we get past the legs here, and we're getting real close, you'll be able to see, I think, in a minute here. You want to get down as close to the head as possible, because there is some good meat in that neck area, and so you want to be able to get at that. So keep putting pressure, keep nipping away, and as I said before, this part's the tricky part, but it's okay. It's not terribly difficult. You just kind of keep pulling, keep nipping, keep pulling, keep nipping. When I told Andy that we were going to use the knife he made me for the show, he was very pleased about that, and so thanks to him, and I certainly can find Andy Ohm Custom Knives. He's doing a great job with that, and I appreciate that one. It was actually perfect for this. It's been used a couple times since he made that a year ago. You can see the connective tissue there, and you got to slide that knife under the skin, not into the meat, but just kind of break up where it's really grabbing on there. As I mentioned before about the gloves, you really do need a good grip, and I don't know, slimy may not be the right word, but it is sometimes a little bit hard to hang on to because of the things under the skin. So that really helps. Plus it saves some time on the scrubbing your hands after. So once you get through the area, I guess it would be maybe the area under the neck, and you've got both legs clear, then it goes a lot faster again. Sometimes if you get stuck, just keep trimming away. I think you can see there on the left front leg that I nipped into the connective tissue a little bit, but we'll be peeling that off later anyhow, so that didn't really matter too much. And if you do make a little cut in the meat, not the end of the world. You're going to be making that as a roast, and in some cases that'll be going to be ground meat, so that won't matter anyways. But my whole thing with the processing part, after you get the skin off and after you get the legs separated, and just the ground meat's very popular now. This deer was relatively small, and so the roasts that are on the front legs, which I'll usually make my jerky from the roasts that are on the front legs, but this one was small enough that just kind of converted that all the way into ground meat, and then we'll make the roasts and those things from the backstraps and from those nice roasts that are on the hind legs. So now we're getting near the head. You kind of want to keep pulling that skin down, and it's basically going to be kind of turned inside out around the head. Now we're past the front legs, and just kind of keep pulling and get as far down and as close to the head as you can. I'm just kind of like turning it inside out here at this point. Pull and nip and pull and nip, and there we go. The skin's off. All right, we got the skin off. Now the second part, we're going to start to separate the different quarters of the deer. And the first thing to do is to remove the front leg. It's actually very easy to remove. It's interesting when you compare the front leg to the hind leg, how much easier it is to remove the front leg. Maybe that's why humans have so much shoulder problems rather than hip problems, but it comes off very easily. You just kind of pull the leg away from the body, and it's just very simple. You just kind of run your knife down. Now I've switched from that round drop point knife to a fillet knife, but you just kind of pull the leg away from the body, and it's just very, very obvious where to separate, and you just kind of nip away. And one thing you want to do before you get this started is have a nice clean plastic bag to put the leg in. As I mentioned before, it was very warm when I shot this deer in the early archery season, so I wanted to, as quickly as possible, get it into their fridge to cool. So I think you can see behind me there, I had a white kitchen trash bag. Get the ones too, by the way, that aren't the scented ones. You don't want to add anything to the meat like that, but you can see there now as I'm trimming the last part of the leg away from the neck area. That just took a minute or so, but the front leg has some nice roasts on. Those are pretty handy for either for jerky or for small roasts. You can put multiple roasts together for certain recipes. Since this deer was relatively small, I think I'm going to use most of that part for ground, but put it in a white kitchen trash bag and get it covered up, and you can set it on your chainsaw if your chainsaws there in your shed with you, as mine is. Now this gets you set up for everyone's favorite part of the deer, the backstrap. and that runs along the spine. And of course, you can see it there, but there's some kind of connective tissue in the way. So you got to get that out of the way first. So this is kind of like skinning. Take the tip of the knife and you kind of run underneath that connective tissue. Or in this case, you can kind of pull it away and trim. I mentioned before, you want to have something to kind of pitch that stuff in, or else it's got to just be scattered all over the floor. You're going to have a mess to clean up. So I keep a box there, and I put a garbage bag in the box. And when I'm pulling off these little pieces that aren't really good for food, I just drop them in the box, and that makes it easy for cleaning up after. But yeah, you want to peel away that connective tissue, and you can see underneath the backstrap there, it's about 2.5, 3 feet long. If you have a really big deer, it's I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 inches thick. On this case, it was a smaller deer, so it maybe 5 inches thick, something like that. But the backstrap is where you get great steaks from, and it's great on the grill. You can use it for kind of like anything, very, very tasty and very tender. So this is what would basically make the deer, help the deer run and kind of bend forward as the deer's taking a big step. So it runs clear from way up in the neck all the way back, and it starts right back by the start of the hind leg here. But the front leg blocks it. You have to get that front leg off first. So now we've got it exposed, and it's actually relatively easy to get that off. But you have to get that connective tissue out of the way first. It's kind of like a little pocket there. You can get your finger in underneath there and see where you're cutting, so you're not going to cut into and damage any of the great meat there. But it goes all the way up to right in behind where the hind leg attaches. So you can kind of feel the hip bone there. So trim all that stuff out of the way first, and then you want to get your knife tip right in. And I'm trying as much as possible to save every tiny scrap of this, because this is one of my favorite parts of the deer for the recipe. So get that connective tissue out of the way, and then you can feel with your thumb there where the hip bone is. And so you gotta kind of separate the backstrap from the hip bone, and just do a little bit at a time. You feel that connection, and keep your knife tip going in there. You have to kind of angle in a little bit to get in around the spine and in around the hip bone. But you can feel the spine right down the center of the deer's back. So start the tip of the knife going down right against the spine, and then you'll feel it kind of bump into the rib cage. And so you're just going a little bit at a time. And in a way, this is kind of like the skinning part, where you're peeling almost more than you're cutting, but you do have to cut a little bit here. So the cutting part here to get it started, and then once you kind of break it free from where it connects to the hip, just keep some pressure on, and then you kind of alternate by taking the tip of the knife over kind of against the against the outside of the rib cage, and then down the spine. So you go down the spine a little bit, and then reach over kind of like along the rib cage and trim a little bit. And then so you're kind of alternating back and forth, down the spine and down the rib cage, and continuing to put pressure with your opposite hand there on the backstrap and keeping it all intact. And you can see here as the pieces connect to each little rib, you just have to kind of separate it from the rib. And then you can see too how it connects to the vertebrae that run down the spine. And so you may have to trim a little bit as you go. But in a way, it's kind of like getting that skin off, where as you put pressure, you're just kind of keeping pressure on and trimming a little bit as you go along, and it goes along relatively well. Now, when you go to process this later, before you put it on the grill, you're going to have to trim some of that. Anything that's silvery or that's fatty, you want to get that off. That's not that's the kind of stuff that makes the taste not so good. So you want to trim those things off. But as you can see here, you can just kind of peel it away put a little pressure on, use the tip of the knife, and break it away from the spine and break it away from the ribs. This part really isn't hard, but you just keep a little pressure on, keep nipping away. Now we're into the area where the front leg attached. A little more structures in there, but same thing. This is about the area where it ends. So I broke off the end there. We can get that part out later. But that's the backstrap. And what I like to do is to cut that into like about a foot-long section for the grill, but you want to peel that silvery part off first. So there's the backstrap. All right, the part of the deer that maybe is the best part altogether is the filet mignon, the tenderloin. And so we've just taken off the backstrap on the outside. Now the filet mignon is smaller, but it's a very similar piece, but it's on the inside. And it's kind of like doing the backstrap, but you got some other stuff you got to trim out of the way to get at it there. It would be the equivalent. Now when you get the filet mignon, the tenderloin on a cow, it's like maybe the size of the backstrap on a deer. On the deer, of course, it's much smaller here. But you got to trim some of some internal things out of the way, just some connective tissue and things there. So it's inside of the hind leg, and again, right against the spine like the backstrap is on the outside. So you have to trim away a couple of connective tissues and get your finger in there to find the top and to find the bottom. So now we have the deer hanging with its head down here. So I'm reaching up to get the very top of the connection of the tenderloin. To me, it's the tastiest, and you certainly don't want to miss that on the inside of the rib cage. You don't want to miss that part. It's great on the grill. If you have other things, this is like the day after you get the deer. That's what you celebrate. You have that on the grill. That's what we do at my house, anyways. So you got to trim a couple of things of connective tissue and anything that's white or silvery. You don't want that with your meat. So you can separate the tenderloin mostly by your hand, just a little bit of trimming with the knife, and you want to be careful because it's the tenderloin, so it's a little bit tender, and it's fairly easy that it can break. So as you get it separated, oh, and I dropped it, but it stayed inside. As you get it separated, you can see there again makes for a tremendous dinner, but there's the tenderloin. Okay, the final part here of the quartering. Now, as you can see, I've got both back straps and both front legs off. The final part of the quartering is to get off the hind leg. So as I've been hoisting the deer up by its hind legs, we're going to have to unattach one of the legs so we can get it undone. But the process is a little bit of the quartering. To me, this is the trickiest part, is to get the hind leg off because there's kind of more connections on that back leg here. So one thing, we don't need the hoof, so I'm gonna get rid of the leg here, just the hoof, and I use just a regular saw that I've had for a long time. I know watched the processor one time, and zip zip zip, he was with a knife and was able to get that done just in seconds. But you're cutting through that tendon that we talked about before, and you're cutting through the bone. Not hard. But again, you're not using that lower leg for anything, so we make a little cut on each side. And I use a pruning saw that I keep in the shed for this, and do a couple deer a year usually for myself and for family and friends. And that saw just stays in the shed, and I use it for that all the time. Now, as the deer's facing there towards the camera, you can see the bone is in the front. And again, it's only a relatively easy process to get cut through the bone. This particular saw has fine teeth on one side and thicker teeth on the other side, and also use that for for preparing antlers when we've mounted antlers before for the show. But anyhow, cut through the bone and then use the knife and just can pretty easily cut through the connective tissue. And then you don't need that lower leg. We'll get that in the scrap bin. Okay, now when you look at the leg you're going to cut, again, connective tissue, you got to trim through that. You're not going to use that, so get rid of that and throw that in your scrap box. But as you trim down there, it's like all this process. It's yes, there's cutting involved, but you want to put some pressure on and pull. And if you're not slicing and cutting quickly, you're just going a little bit at a time here as you're removing the hind leg quarter. So this is the quartering process, but again, there's some kind of fat and connective tissue. You want to get that out of the way. But the hind legs have the nicest roasts on. There's several roasts on each hind leg that are nice meals on their own, and there's lots of extra meat on there that you can trim off for making ground meat. But as you put a little bit of pressure to separate it from the other leg, just trim away with a knife a little bit, and you want to find the top of the thigh bone, and it's got that rounded top on, and where it tucks into the hip joint. Right there, you can see the very top of the thigh bone, very round. You can feel it with your finger. You can see it. And again, as you put a little bit of pressure on the leg, it's connected inside there with a couple of tendons and ligaments and things. And so put a little pressure on it and just nip away a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. Anything that's red is going to make nice meat, and even if it doesn't stay intact as a nice big roast, you can use it as part of your ground after. Anything that's white or silvery, you're not going to use, so you can get rid of those. But right inside that hip joint, you can see there the top of the thigh bone. So kind of put pressure on the leg. When you look at it from around the back, you can't really tell, so you have to kind of look at it from the inside. But all of that white stuff on the outside, we're going to eventually trim that off. But as you get the thigh bone loose from the inside, now I'm going to flip it around here and get to work on the outside. You do have to trim away a little bit of that, about that thick sinewy fat layer that's right underneath the skin. Even though I'm using my fillet knife now, I still have a kind of a rounded fillet knife, so that when you are doing this kind of stuff, again, you're not stabbing into it, you're using that rounded part of the knife to separate that you're not going to use, to separate that from the meat. So it's kind of like trimming, not stabbing and cutting. You're kind of trimming it away. But you want to do a little bit of that so that you can expose that connection there, so that you can get that leg off. You can feel the hip joint with your finger, and so just kind of work around. And you do need the tip of the knife here, and you do need a little stabbing here at this point so that you can get the tip in there, because you do have to break through the meat right where it connects to the spine. So a little bit at a time, take the tip of the knife in there. Again, I like a nice kind of long, skinny fillet knife for this part of the work. But you make that cut, take your time, make that cut. And as you put the pressure on, you can kind of feel where the connection is between the leg and the body. And just take the tip of the knife and just a little bit at a time, just kind of break those connections loose. Now, even on a small deer like this one, the hind leg is actually where all the most of the meat is. The tenderloin, the backstrap, the front legs, all great. But most of the meat that you use is going to be in the hind leg. So even on this pretty small deer, this hind leg probably weighs about maybe 10 pounds. And of course, by the time we trim everything off and get rid of the bone and get rid of the connective tissue, there'll be, maybe 6 or 8 pounds, something like that. But of the quartering of the deer, removing the hind leg is the trickiest part to me, because you have all that connective tissue on that hind leg. And so once you get the head of the femur, as you can see there, once you get that free, then you're just nipping away at the rest of that connective tissue and at the rest of the meat. And there we go. Now the next part's going to be to separate the muscle groups that make the roast and that'll make the ground meat. But of course, the first step is to get the deer quartered, and so there we go. There's the quartered hind leg. We worked on the quartering the other day, and now this has been aging in the refrigerator for several days. So just wanted to start to work on the process of separating the muscle groups and getting rid of all this white stuff, the fat and connective tissue. And that's the whole, from my perspective, that's the whole butchering process. So if it's white or shiny, you want to get rid of it. So I keep the trash can sitting right next to me. And then little bitty pieces of meat that come off with it or that you have to separate from the white stuff, I save those, and those go in the ground. So all that stuff, trash can. So I have a hind leg here, and they're a little trickier to get off the deer than is the front leg. But interestingly enough, they're a little easier to get taken apart at this process than are the front legs, because they're bigger and it's easier to get your hands on the bigger pieces. You can probably hear we've got four-legged friends who are always very interested whenever this stuff's going on. I'll keep going on this trimming later on, but just want to just see some of what this looks like to part of it done. All right, you can see the muscle groups just kind of through the connective tissue and stuff on the outside. So sometimes you just have to kind of gotta trim that part off anyways, but you have to kind of get started there. And I like a knife like this one that's nice and thin and that has a rounded part, so that I'm not stabbing in here necessarily. I do have some other knives that I've used in the past. This one has become kind of my favorite. So as you hang on to this connective tissue, as you nip away at it like that, just kind of put pressure on and then just use that rounded part to, I mean, yes, there's some cutting, but it's almost more like when you're pulling off the skin. It's almost just kind of following where it wants to separate. So that comes off. See the connective tissue here and this stuff that lines the muscle groups. Yeah, we want to get rid of that. And then once you start to get some of that off, you can really begin to see the real distinct roasts and the different pieces that are really favorites when we get to our cooking. So you can see here just a couple minutes of trimming stuff here, and I can show you the nice round steak that we're going to have out of here shortly. Some of these smaller little muscle pieces it'll take me a long time to get all this junk trimmed off of them, but then I'll get them in the grinder, and as you peel and nip, you can see the different muscle groups. the key thing of the whole process is to get rid of the connective tissue, get rid of the fatty stuff, and these linings here that kind of hold the muscle groups together. We want to get rid of all that, because those things give it like a sour taste. You don't want those things in with the meat. So again, it's not terribly hard, and I'm certainly no expert at this. There's people that are really good at this kind of stuff, but a friend talked me into trying it one time, and I've been doing mine and family and friends, others, ever since. So I'm not sure I would even say I've done maybe 50 or 60 ever, or something like that. The guys at the processing places have done thousands. So yes, they're experts about this, but I enjoy the whole process all the way through, from practicing shooting and all those things to building tree stands to getting all set up for the season, food plots and all those kind of things, and then harvesting the deer, and then this part, and then on to having some great recipes from it. So okay, here's the round steak, very visible now. So I'm just going to trim around the thigh bone here to set that free. Yeah, we're going to get rid of this stuff, so you don't want to be cutting in too much and wasting meat, but I'm going to get rid of all that white and shiny stuff. And there's a little bit there I can save for ground. Okay, my tip of my knife is right on the thigh bone there now, so I'm going to kind of be peeling it away. This is kind of like we did the back strap, where you're kind of trimming as you're putting pressure on, pulling it away. As you do that one with the spine, this one you're doing away from the femur. And again, I'll trim off the rest of this white connective tissue here, ligaments, tendons, and then these little, I think they're called bursas, that line around the joints. Trim all that stuff as we go, just a little bit at a time. Watch your fingers. Now here's the other side of the thigh bone. Let's pull this piece off first. Just as you put pressure on a little bit, and just nip with the tip of the blade. Again, we did that along the other side. And here where it connects to the lower part of the leg. Trim it off there. And I'll come back after and scrape this more. We don't want to lose one crumb of that great meat that can be part of our... Here's one thing too that I do, is I put the tip of the blade in just real gently that way and slide it underneath that silvery stuff. And when you're going to have this be a roast, you want to trim as much of that off as you can. Okay, so that's what's known as a round roast. That's great. I'll come back later and I'll spend some more time trimming some more of that off. Let me show you one other really nice roast here that's on the hind leg. So the round roast is right here on the back part of the thigh. Right here is where the thigh bone joins onto the hip. You can see that little round ball that goes into the hip socket there. So right in front of that round roast, there's another really nice roast. And again, they come apart pretty easily. There's connective tissues and things inside. Just kind of break those apart. Be careful as you're cutting around your fingers. But again, you're not really cutting a whole lot. You're putting pressure on and then just letting the knife just kind of separate something that it wants to separate naturally. So there's one of these nice roasts on the back of the leg and one on the front of the leg. And so we're just going to separate them all. So what you usually end up with from the hind leg are 3 really nice roasts, each one of which makes a great dinner for the whole family. And then a bunch for ground. So here's a bunch of connective tissue and stuff we'll just pitch. I've just got one little connection here with the lower part of the leg. We're going to separate that out. And then get these 2 roasts apart here. Flip that over so you can see the other side here. So again, I've got a bunch of stuff to peel off the back here, but I think you can see the connection spot right there. So let me just put pressure and then I'm just touching gently with the knife here, separating those 2. So there's one really nice roast. Again, I'll trim all this part off. And then here's the other really nice roast. This may be the best one of the whole thing, the one that's on the front part of the leg. So separate it right there. Go. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3 really nice roasts and lots more ground on there that I'll get off and clean up later. First, I'm going to trim all the excess off these nice roasts and we'll get them in the freezer. Joining us now, Chef Lisa Beck. So Lisa, now this deer came from, so this ground came from the food processor, which I normally, it was kind of on the small side. So normally I run through the grinder. Right. It actually came out relatively well, just kind of like regular ground.
I wouldn't have known the difference.
You turn the little thing and you put in like about 1 pound, fills up the thing, you know.
Right.
So you don't think it's going to be any different to work with?
No, well, you know, I've used a little bit of it already and I didn't notice any difference whatsoever. So. Okay. So we are making a sweet Italian meatball. And we are using your deer, which I thank you because, you know, Terry just got one, but it's not processed yet. So I didn't have any, so Duane was so gracious to lend me a couple pounds. But we have a pound of venison burger, and this is straight venison. And then we have a half a pound of pork. You can do ground pork, pork sausage, whatever. This is a half a pound of pork sausage. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put this. This is a new recipe, but I think you're really going to like it. We're going to add some Alfredo sauce to it when we're done, and then put it over fettuccine noodles. Okay. So we have our pound of ground venison, and we're going to add a half a pound of our ground. This is our pork sausage, and to that. We are going to add 1/4 cup of plain breadcrumbs. Okay. And now we're going to add a teaspoon of dried pepper flakes, or parsley flakes.
Okay.
A teaspoon of fennel seed.
Okay. That's like a real...
That's what you have in sausage.
In the sausage, gives it that real specific flavor.
It's like a little spice to it.
Yeah.
I have minced 1 garlic clove, which I'm just going to use this to get it out. Okay. That goes in there. And we have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 3/4 teaspoon of pepper. So a little bit more pepper is going to go in this. It's really flavorful. I am going to do about a teaspoon of the skin of a lemon.
They call that lemon zest?
Lemon zest, yep. And
That's surprising. I would have not thought lemon for a...
Well, and it's a sweet Italian meatball, so you would also think that there would be sugar added to this, but there isn't.
Yeah, you said sweet before, and I haven't seen anything that's like sweet yet.
No, really, there isn't. And I'm just eyeballing this. I just kind of do that, but it's about a teaspoon.
I think of the lemon as being not sweet but sour, but maybe the zest.
The zest is a little different, yeah.
That's a little bit different than the...
Okay, and one more ingredient. You need to beat an egg and then add an egg to it. Okay. And then my hands are going to get dirty.
Ah, okay. I notice you have a left-handed fork there.
I do.
That you're using.
It's important to use those. So now we're going to make this all go together. It's the messy part, but
the fun part.
The fun part. Took my rings off so we didn't get them in there. Not sure able to be seen here.
Any magic of way to do this, or
no? You're just. I suppose you could put it. I do use a lot of the times my KitchenAid mixer. You could do that, but this is kind of fun. I'm going to make meatballs anyways with my hands, right?
So have your hands in
that's right. So you just want to make sure it's really the sausage is mixed in well.
Just kind of blend it all through.
Yep.
Okay.
It has a great smell. It's a different smell. This is a different kind of a recipe for a meatball, but I think you're going to find that it's a good one, and it makes a nice meal because we're going to use, like I said, we're going to use some Alfredo sauce. We are going to make some fettuccine, and we're going to put it over that. So
sounds great.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I get that really mixed up well. And what I'm going to have you do, Duane, while I'm doing this, is there's a pan back there, like a cookie sheet, with sides. Yes, with the spray that we always use. And I have the sides on it because obviously, they're going to get a little greasy and when they cook, which I have preheated the oven to 350.
Should I spray?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. Yep. And you're going to put this in the oven once we make the meatballs. They're going to go in for about 30 minutes, and halfway through I would turn them, and then they get, cooked evenly and not all brown on one side. Okay. So now I'm going to make some meatballs, and you can make them whatever size you want.
You want giant meatballs. If you want little bitty ones, you can.
Yep. You can do whatever you want. I kind of like that size.
I like the left-handed meatballs myself.
Oh yes, those are definitely they're the better kind. They're the better kind, Duane. Not all right-handed people would agree with that, but
I mean, everybody has right-handed meatballs. The left-handed ones they're just very special. Unique.
Yes, made by special people, of course.
Absolutely.
People who are in their right mind, I guess. I think that's how it works. We're utilizing our right side of our brain.
Is there a certain number you're going for here?
No, I mean, like I said, you make them smaller, you're going to get more.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna try to make them about the same size. And they're sticky, but okay.
So those are maybe a 1 ounce each one, give or take?
Yeah. Some might be a little bit bigger than others. I'm just eyeballing it. But like I said, the smell of these, I mean, you smell the lemon, the fennel. It's a nice change up for a meatball. I made this for my family the other night, and they seemed to like it.
It went over well?
It did.
Most of the things that you make here, at least, seem to go over well.
They do. Every once in a while, I create something that maybe one or two. They're not crazy about it, but they'll eat it because they're hungry. Mm-hmm. But it's not a family fave. They like this, so this is definitely a keeper as well. I like doing the show because I'm always looking for new recipes, and
keeps you out there digging. And
that's right.
Yeah.
The funny times are when I'm in the store and somebody asks me about a recipe, and it might be one that we've made 3 years ago or so.
And they want to know what the ingredients were? Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I don't usually remember that. Some of them I do because some of them I make frequently. They're family favorites and I'm making them all the time. Other ones I invent or I find for the show or somebody's given me, and I make them, but not as often. So I don't remember. But it's cute when they ask. I get a kick out of that. So,
in the past we've kind of only focused on the hunting part of the deer and really not talked so much about getting it from the hunting part, getting it to this part.
Right.
So I'm actually glad we had that as an idea this time to see the whole thing through. And just one other thing about that too is if you talk to 10 guys, you're going to get 10 different ways of doing that.
To do it, yeah.
My way is not the right way. It's not the right. It's just what I was taught.
It's your way.
It's just what I was taught years ago. And but my thing is get out there and do it. And I don't have anything against the processors that use that. They're out there doing their work, and that's great.
Right. And some people, they don't have time. They don't have the time to do it. Someone who might have, a whole bunch of little kids at home, and they can't. And that's what those people are for. So they do a great job.
They do a super job, and not horribly expensive and all that kind of stuff.
No.
But I kind of like the whole process the way through.
That's so you. That doesn't surprise me at all.
And maybe that's a Crawford County Outdoors thing. Well, here's how you build a tree stand.
There you go.
Here's how you go practice shooting. There you go. Yeah. My favorite thing on pheasant hunting is here's how you get your dog, ready for the season.
Ready for the season. Yep. It's a process.
That looks great.
Okay, so we're going to stick these in the oven for about 30, and I'm going to have you do it.
My hands are clean.
Yes, it's for about 30 minutes. We're going to turn them halfway through, and then when they come out, what we're going to do is we're going to put them in Alfredo sauce, and we're going to let them cook and get warm and bubbly with the sauce, and then we're going to put them over fettuccine.
In the oven.
Yep, 30 minutes, 350.
Lisa, we have some taste testers. Doesn't that happen sometimes?
Yep, Gavin and Kendall are here to taste test for us.
Yeah. Well, can we do we need a drum roll, or can I just take the lid off?
There you go. Take the lid off.
Yay.
Yes. So we
My
have.
favorite part.
Yes, we took our meatballs out of the oven and we placed them in the pan, and I added a jar, and you can make your own Alfredo sauce, or you can buy a jar, which I just used a jar, and you heat it up till it's nice and bubbly, and then you cook some Alfredo or some fettuccine, and which we did. So we're going to plate that up a little bit and let everybody taste, and we also have a little Parmesan cheese to go on top, which is really good.
Hey Gavin, how's the Parmesan cheese?
Whoops.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's
Gavin.
good. Okay. He's been sampling it.
I know. They're hungry, these boys of mine. It's a little different. We're not usually plating up. I'm just going to set these over here, and once I get it all on there, then we'll put the other stuff on top. Huh? It's a little out of control. Sorry,
Lisa,
don't mind my fingers.
Left-handed pasta
It is a
serving
left-handed pasta server.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to add the good stuff. And you can have more meatballs if you want. And please let me put some Parmesan on that as well. Okay. Smells really good.
So sweet Italian meatballs.
Right. And we really didn't add any sugar to make them sweet. That's what they're called. So I'll add a little bit of this, and then everybody can take theirs, and we can all try them at the same time. Got to add that little Parmesan, right? That little extra. There we go. Duane.
Okay.
All right, let's cut up one of those meatballs and see how they taste. What do you think?
They're good. Really good.
You can taste that nutmeg. And the fennel.
A tiny little bit of lemon in there.
Yeah,
It's different, but
it's
it's
a
not,
different
it's
taste.
not sour. It's
No, it's sweet.
kind of like fruity almost. in a way.
Yeah, it's sweet. Did I do okay? Awesome. Another good one, Duane. I don't know.
As always.
Yeah,
We're going to keep talking about that cookbook idea. We're going
Yeah.
to have to work on that.
I think we should. I think our viewers would be really excited to be able to utilize that.
Sweet Italian meatballs from your deer.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Lisa, as
Yes.
always.
You're welcome. Thank
Thank
you.
you to the folks at home for joining us today on Crawford County Outdoors, and we'll talk to you next time.